Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. You know, I recently asked my hairstylist to make me look sexy,
What did she do?
so she started drinking. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Finspan from Stomemaier Games. In Finspan from Stomemaier Games, 1 to 5 players take on the roles of marine researchers as they attempt to observe and interact with underwater life. Now, this is a huge game. There's a lot of videos out there on how to play. I'm just going to give you the basics and tell you my thoughts. Each player has their player board, and of course, you have kind of different levels of water. You kind of have relatively up top, and then it gets progressively deeper. You have some fish printed on the board, but you're also going to get a hand of fish cards at the beginning of the game. Now, essentially, how the game works is on your turn, you can pretty much do two things. You can go ahead and pay the cost of the fish card, which is in the upper left, and you can place that fish on the board in pretty much anywhere you choose within the parameters of the card itself. It may tell you certain places you have to place it. So you're going to go ahead and place those cards on the board, and they may give you certain advantages when you play them, or advantages later in the game, or maybe end game. Different things will pop up with that specific fish. There will also be a point value associated with it, and things like how big that fish is, the size, because some fish can consume other fish, but they can only consume fish that are smaller than they are. Now, the second big thing you can do in the game is dive. Essentially, you have kind of a number of tokens, and you can go ahead and use those once you place down a fish, or you can take it to dive. And as you dive, you're going and you're hitting all of the fish and all of the locations, and any, when activated, abilities will trigger when they go down there. So you may get more things you can do, more items, more interesting things. You may draw more cards. You may place eggs on the cards. You may be able to hatch eggs and create fish. You may be able to maneuver fish, these young fish, into other locations. And when 3 of them come together, you have a school, which are going to be bonus points. Now, you've got an achievement board off to the side, so as you're doing all of these actions, you've kind of got an eye on that achievement board. You're attempting to fulfill its requirements in order to score for that round. Now, each round is called a week, and you'll have 6 turns for each week, which means you take a total of 24 turns during the game. Now, at the end of the last week, you're going to go ahead and total up everything that's scoreable, the printed number on the fish, any schools you have, any specific objectives you've got, anything that triggers at the end of the game. You're going to look at all your victory points, and whoever has the most victory points wins. Finspan. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. All right, so that's just the basics. There's a lot more going on here, but again, this is a pretty heavily covered game right now, pretty hot game right now. So I'm not going to spend too much time on my overview of gameplay. Now, I will say, we actually, initially, we were going to play with 5 players on the night we were going to play this. And one of the players had to back out. He couldn't make it that night, so we just played with 4. And it was kind of a good thing, because the player boards here are kind of, they're not horizontal, they're vertical. And there wasn't enough room on my board for 4 players. I actually put mine on kind of a TV tray just so we had more room. So, observations. First of all, this is sometimes when you take actions, the if activated actions or some other things may trigger some kind of global abilities, right? Everybody gets to do something. Everybody gets to do this or do that. But with that exception, this is pretty much multiplayer solitaire, right? Each of you are doing your own thing, kind of keeping an eye on what everybody else is doing, but you're focused on what you're doing and the engine that you are building on your board. Now, it's also very dependent upon the cards you draw in the game. We played here in the video. I won. This is our first game. I won. And it was pretty. I mean, I got pretty lucky with the card draws. I was drawing some pretty high scoring fish, and I think I only won by a few points. So that was kind of a big part of why I won, is I got some really good cards. But the game fundamentally is very similar. If you played Wingspan, if you played Wormspan, this is not going to be a difficult game for you to play at all. It'll be very familiar to you. Now, speaking of that, when I first played Wingspan, I was not really expecting a lot. I didn't think there'd be that much to it. And so when I played the game, I was actually quite surprised at how much fun I had with it. It was a lot more fun than I was expecting it to be. In fact, Wingspan kind of was a pleasant surprise game for me. And I really enjoyed it. And then last year, Wormspan came out, and I got to tell you something, Wormspan totally killed Wingspan for me, because I kind of liked not having the dice tower there. It just felt like it was a little more intuitive and played a little faster. And I liked it better. I mean, I like Wormspan, but I thought Wormspan to me was the superior game. And I actually ended up giving away, donating my copy of Wingspan. And then Finspan comes out, and it's like the third game in this series. And, it's super fun. We all really enjoyed it. We all really got a kick out of it. It was fun. But again, I've got Wormspan, and I don't know that I need another game in this series. Of the three games, Wormspan is still my favorite. By a long shot. I think both thematically, I like it a lot. Although I think it's pretty cool in Finspan. I mean, just how many fish they have here, how many kinds of fish. Just researching this game would have been a chore, I think. But labor of love, I'm sure. But it's quite amazing to see how many different kinds of fish they've got here. But still, I don't know. I was a little more attracted to the dragon theme there. And then too, again with gameplay, I felt like there was just a little bit more meat to Wormspan than here. I feel like Finspan, of the three, Finspan's probably the lightest game. So maybe it's the most accessible of the three. Not that any of them have a very high bar to entry. I liked Finspan, and I think I'm going to hang on to it for the time being. I think ultimately, maybe after I played a few more times, I may end up donating this one or giving it to a friend, just because I've got Wormspan, which again, I think is the superior game. I really like Finspan quite a bit, but not as much as Wormspan. I'm going to go ahead on the Cody scale. I'm going to give Finspan a 7 out of 10. It is a good, solid game. And if you want something that's maybe a little bit easier to jump into, this is probably the best of the three. But again, I think Wormspan is the best of the series. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we'd ask you to please leave a comment for us here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, on X. We would ask you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel here. Give us a thumb. That means a lot to us. And also, again, follow us on social media, Facebook, X. Again, we appreciate it. We would also ask you to give a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek. And if you do like what you see here, please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history, books on history, fun things like that. We would also ask you, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you really do like what we do here, please click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. What's the difference between a poorly dressed man on a unicycle and a well-dressed man on a bicycle? Attire. Fish enthusiasts as they attempt to fish